Thank you so much, Chamberlain. It's a new week. Welcome to Business Morning on Sunrise Daily. It's time to do about 25 minutes of business right here on Channels Television. I'm Ini John McQuarrie. We'll start with what's going on in the global space. The oil prices, it edged high on Monday, recovering from sharp falls last week after Washington pledged to launch further strikes on Iran-backed groups in the Middle East, and as Ukrainian drones struck southern Russia's largest. Let's look at the number closely now. Brent has gone from about $80 to $77.69 this morning, and that's up 0.5%. But you would note that last week we were talking about $80, and so we've seen it drop right here. WTI, that's from the United States, $72.53 for a barrel, and that's gained 0.4%. Both benchmarks ended last week down about 7%. They fell 2% on Friday after stronger than expected U.S. jobs data suggested interest rate cuts could be further down in the future, and on progress in ceasefire negotiations between Israel and Hamas. Investors remain wary of any escalation in the Middle East conflict after the United States signaled further strikes on Iran-backed groups in the Middle East in response to a deadly attack on U.S. troops in Jordan. On Friday, the U.S. Department of Justice announced sanction invasion charges and seizures linked to an oil trafficking network that it says finances Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. It seized more than 520,000 barrels of sanctioned Iranian oil aboard the crude, which has been anchored in the Yellow Sea en route to China. A lot of geopolitics right there affecting the price of oil, and we know that it comes back home, back here in Nigeria, having oil as a major stay when it comes to revenue for the government. Well, still around that space, the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited, that's the NNPCL, has released a report showing that no fewer than 36 oil blocks are under concession to international oil companies operating in Nigeria and other indigenous counterparts in the country. 8 blocks are located in deep water, 5 blocks continental shelf, 15 are on land, 5 blocks are located in swamp, and another 3 blocks are located in partial swamp terrain. The blocks are classified into prospecting license and oil mining license. Now let's go to a conversation that was really right last week. The central bank was very busy. We know that we had a series of circulars. The last one on Friday was to do with imports and exports. The central bank has increased the customs exchange rate to 1,356. Some say there was another increase, but we'll confirm that later. The new rate has since been reflected on the customs trade portal. The increase was vehemently opposed, obviously, as expected by importers and custom brokers when they first increased the customs import duty rate by about 43%. And expressing their frustration at the incessant increase. Stakeholders in the industry say businesses are yet to recover from the shocks of the new round of currency devaluation resulting from a sudden unification of the exchange rate, which has driven the official exchange rate to about 1,004. And we hope to delve into this tomorrow, so you don't want to miss Business Morning tomorrow at 10 a.m. We'll be bringing the head of the customs, at least in Seme area, to tell us how this is affecting them, how it is being implemented, and of course, more importantly, how it's going to affect you in the nearest future. So you want to join us 10 a.m. tomorrow for that conversation. Now, well, we are happy that the children who were kidnapped in Ekiti have been released. Unfortunately, the teacher was killed, very unfortunate, and the issue of kidnapping in the country is heading the news in so many ways and so many days than we would love to hear. What impact is it having, the business of insecurity in Nigeria? What are we suffering from it? What can we expect? We'll have that conversation after this break. Do stay with us. welcome back. In recent months, the Federal Capital Territory of Nigeria, Abuja, has witnessed a significant surge in minor thefts, one-chance robberies, armed robberies, and home break-ins, and of course, kidnapping. Not that it's just Abuja, like I said just before the break. The Ekiti students may have regained their freedom, but how much was exchanged? Was it 10 million? Was it less? Was it more? You know, people find it difficult to come to the public to actually affirm how much they have paid or suffered when it comes to, kidnapping and all of that. But let's have that slide right here where we talk about the impact that this has had. While we use the Federal Capital Territory as an example, we can tell you that, and you know, I don't need to tell you if you live in Nigeria, even if you live outside Nigeria, of some of the impact. Now, according to SBM Intelligence, they carried out this report and saw that when it comes to the impact, estate security fees have gone up about 20%. That's right. So if you used to have just any security personnel in your estate, with what's happening, obviously you want to up your game, so you maybe get the armed guys and all of that. We've seen that fees for that has gone up about 20%. Business revenues, obviously, those who used to hold the night economy, for instance, clubs and shops, even restaurants, you want to go home and close early so that you avoid, at least you reduce the risk. And we've seen business revenue have dropped about 33%. Transport fares, there are some areas I learned in Abuja right now that you take a cab there, you have to pay more because the driver factors in the extra risk. And so that has gone up about 10 to 250 rents because of the fear. Not jackpot also, you know, some individuals living in these areas have decided to relocate abroad. And then you've seen a drop in the real estate. So if you had real estate or residence or office in some of those areas, you would see otherwise. But let's bring in those who carried out this research. We have Ikemesit Effiong, partner and head of research at SBM Intelligence. Thank you so much. So I don't need to ask you why you carried out all of this, but tell us what logistics or parameters did you use, for instance, to come up with these estate fees, and who did you talk to, how many people, and things like that, so we can know the reliability of your data.
Good morning, and thanks for having me.
Good to have you.
Right, yeah. So one of the things that we've been doing over the last few years at SBM Intelligence is we've been trying to put data and some form of quantitative understanding to the issue of insecurity in Nigeria. From 2020, we've published what we call the Economics of Kidnapping report every year, which basically gives a national view, right, of what Nigerians are paying in terms of ransom payments, where are sort of the problematic hotspots, right, and what are those trend lines looking like year on year. So we decided to do something similar, right, for Abuja. And typically with these reports, we'll talk to business owners, we'll talk to renters. We have field representatives in every state in the country, as well as the Federal Capital Territory. And so for this, and this report was actually 3 or 4 months in the making, right? So we actually took our time.
I think this is as recent as January the 26th.
Yes, we captured January data, right, in putting this together, right? So we spoke to a broad suite of business owners, mobility operators, those who operate, right, the ride-hailing services, obviously residents, right? We also spoke to, parts of the security architecture, right, in Abuja, so the people the people who take charge of security, both at the public and also at the private level, in order to get a really broad and submissive view of how the federal.
And you're able to come up that, security estates, for instance, they had to surge because obviously they have to get maybe better empowered security personnel and outfits.
Yes, absolutely, right. So we've seen a situation where people for one have moved from estates and gated communities that are seen to be less well protected to better protected estates. And what some of these gated communities have started doing is to beef up their security arrangements, hire bigger and better security companies, in some cases apply for licenses in order for their security operatives to carry arms, and also make arrangements to ensure that those early warning systems, in order to alert the police or even military formations that are pretty close to their geographic locations, right, are also put in place. So we've seen a lot of that happen over the last few months.
So let's look at some of the impacts, if we could have that slide, some of the impacts, which, I mean, financial loss, for instance. We've had 30 million, we've had 50 million for the Ekiti students. I think we had about 10 million, not sure now, because people don't really go public. You know, so, I mean, I spoke to someone who said the whole village had to come together, you know, to get some money. We heard about crowdfunding, for instance. These are resources that would have been used for education, for good living and welfare, that are being put together for kidnappers. Boosting the kidnap industry, unfortunately. Yeah,
unfortunately. So we spoke to someone, for example, for this report, who said he had been saving to open a furniture business, but he had to channel, you know, those savings into helping to get his brother rescued. And I think the ransom sum in his brother's case was 50 million naira. He's in debt now. He's lost relationships because he has not been able, right, to make up those payments. And you're seeing those stories pop up now and again, but not just in the federal capital, to be clear,
obviously,
but right across the country, as you said. And so there's a real downward effect, right, on monies and resources that are being channeled into ransom payments, depriving. We talk a lot about economic investment, and especially foreign direct investment, but you also have domestic investments, right? The investments that people, you know, plow into starting up businesses or scaling up whatever businesses they have, or furthering their education to make themselves more productive. A lot of that is now being channeled into ensuring that their loved ones are rescued from the clutches.
I think I read in also your report somebody who said he's now without a car because he had to sell his car to rescue his brother. You know, and unfortunately, we don't hear a lot about these kidnappers being caught, in spite of the fact that we have our phones, we have our NIN, we have our BVN, we have cameras, CCTV cameras, and all of that.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I just returned from Abuja, you know, last night, and we had to give a security briefing to a company that operates there in order to help their staffers, you know, feel safe. And that's increasingly becoming, you know, a clear and present reality, unfortunately, not just in the federal capital, but also in Abuja. It's almost as though right now, you know, insecurity and especially kidnapping now has to be baked into the cost of doing business and unfortunately living in this country.
Yeah, and I can imagine what insurance would do. You understand, insurance premium will also go. But let's look at this now. Increased transport costs, negative value on real estate, and then this. Was Abuja really a night? Did it have a vibrant night economy now? And what impact has it had?
Yeah, I mean, in pockets. So, you know, in places like Wuse 2 and Maitama, for example, right, they are known to have, you know, a pretty extensive and very vibrant night scene. And I can tell from, you know, trying to get drinks and having late evening meetings, right, like the roads are really, really empty, right, at night. I was able to find parking, for example, in Wuse 2 without running around the entire streets, which is not something I've lived in Abuja before. That was not my experience prior to now. In terms of the negative value of real estate, you're especially seeing this come through in sort of the suburbs and outlying areas. So Abuja Municipal, Wuse, Garki, Maitama, Sokoro is still, for the most part, it's not super safe, but it's still for the most part insulated from this current wave of insecurity and kidnapping that you're seeing. But in some of the outlying areas, especially in places like Kubo and Buari and Abaji and all of those places, you're beginning to see a low-key migration back into the city. And real estate values, we're beginning to see the early stages of real estate values going down there, and you're seeing rents and other property usage rates go up in core Abuja.
So who suffers the most in all of this? I mean, the security guys now, this is a boom for business, if you're in security business. Because, I mean, you can charge more, even though you know you are up for more risks and all of that. But, I mean, everybody might want to go into security business at this time.
Well, I mean, there's a conversation about whether that particular sector has enough space to sort of absorb, you know, sort of the excess demand that you're seeing, right, in this current economic paradigm. But in terms of those who are suffering, a lot of operators in sort of the service economy, and services is a big part of the Nigerian economy. Yeah. They are taking a hit definitely from that, you know, less usage rates, more people spending. When you then square this with a high inflationary environment, a low economic growth environment, it's really not a good time to be in the service sector. So security has now become sort of an extra risk item to factor in if you are an operator in the services sector.
Okay. All right. So, I mean, just looking at some of these numbers right here for the story of Mansour, also in Abuja, 50 million was involved. For the lawyer, Mr. Folashade, 7 million. Barrister Cyril, 30 million. The Ekiti students, sorry, I think I said it was a teacher that was killed. It was a driver that was killed, actually, for the Ekiti student, 10 million. And then you said that between May, when President Bola Tinubu took over power, till now, you put it about 4,000. I think that does not really capture it, really, from May till date. Well, national, that is.
Yes, indeed. So what we always say, the disclaimer that we always issue whenever we publish our economics of kidnapping report, and we typically do it around July, right, of every year, is that these numbers and the ransom amounts are typically an undercount. These are the numbers we've been able to verify, cross-check from multiple sources, talk to people on the ground, and we were able to verify, those data. But even at that, 4,000 people, right, in what?
From May, less than a year, about
less than
7 months.
6-7 months,
yeah.
That's a lot of people.
Yeah, it is a lot. And bad brand for the country, a country that wants to boost its FDI, that wants to encourage even local investors. I mean, at this rate, I was talking to someone about going to Enugu, and the person was afraid. I'm like, but Enugu is safe. But it seems everybody is afraid of every part of the country now. Yeah,
absolutely, right. So when we do the economics of kidnapping report, it's a national scan. There are really no zones that are clear-cut outliers in terms of them being safer than others. It's really a matter of degrees of risk. And particularly when it comes to the FCT, we did publish a report, I believe it was in 2017 or thereabouts, that actually said that the FCT was sort of the eye of the storm. So all of the other states that surround it, Niger, Kogi, Kaduna, Nasarawa, were dealing with high levels and elevated levels of insecurity. And we had said, even as early as then, that it was unlikely that the FCT was going to remain this ideal in the midst of this chaos. And unfortunately, what we've now seen in 2023 into 2024 is that the chickens have come home to roost and the FCT is beginning to suck in and capture some of that
I think
demand.
Minister Wike has a whole lot. I know he's been issuing a whole lot of threats, but obviously this goes beyond, threats, into action, which would actually show. But what action would you expect? We've talked about, let's employ more technology. Then we talk about the overhead cost of that, and that's a discouraging factor. We talk about the insufficient infrastructure that can even carry some of this technology to a sustainable degree. So where do we actually start from in your findings? What did you find?
Well, I think the key thing is to utilize and harmonize the effects of our human intelligence capabilities, and we have significant resources that channel towards that in Nigeria, and also how coordination within the security sector works. One of the points that I like to make, right, is that Nigeria still doesn't have the equivalent of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, right? So you don't have all of the uniformed services talking at a coherent, at a strategic, and at a tactical level. And it's as though everyone is doing their own thing in trying to arrest in trying to deal with the country's security situations. And unfortunately, all of those just appear to be many cooks, right, trying to prepare for the soup.
From your point of view now, we do have at least most of what we need. What we need is coordination of the instrument, the architect, both the personnel and the non-personnel.
Absolutely.
Is that what you found?
Yes, indeed. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I think every other thing in terms of, utilizing technology, making sure you have cameras, making sure you have proper early warning systems, those are really just mitigation strategies. In terms of an actual solution, we need broad collaboration within the security services. And people also need to have confidence, right, to support the work that the security services are doing.
Yeah, information.
Exactly. Many people's first recourse in the event of a security incident is not to call the police or is not to engage with the country's security architecture.
That sounds like a long-term orientation that needs to be done to get the people to trust the agencies.
Yes, absolutely. It might be a bit of a chicken and egg situation, but the point is what coordination and broad collaboration does is that it gives people some confidence that in some situations the security authorities can be relied upon, and then that reliability or the perception of that reliability can feed into better behavior on the parts of everyday civilians in terms of working in hand with the security operators. So a bit of a chicken and egg situation, but I think the security services need to lead on this, first and foremost in broadly collaborating, and then the rest of us will follow pretty much.
And then we really need this because the country does need to build its naira, does need investment and production. in the country.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Ikumisits, for your time. Ikumisits Effiong is the partner and head of research at SBM Intelligence.
Absolute pleasure being here.
All right, now let's head to the market and find out how the week fared. Well, I think the biggest news from the markets last week was the Naira, the currency market. We saw a lot of movement. We saw the CBN put in a lot of efforts, to stabilize the Naira. And we saw it closing at about 1,004. A funny scenario we also saw last week where the Naira had more value in the parallel market than the official market. I don't remember seeing that before, but we did see that last week in the market in the midst of all the efforts and the circulars coming from the central bank last week. And I think we saw a bit of movement right there as at the close of market on Friday. If we could have those market numbers just before we get to the currency. The all-share index for the week last week was up 1.63%. Equities cap gained 902 billion to close at about 56 trillion at the close of trade. Can we have others for last week? And we saw, of course, the oil and gas did move a bit, talking about the sectors. We saw the banking, the figures recovered after about 2 negative sessions during the week at the end of that. But let's switch over to the currency market now and speak to Mr. Victor Alui to tell us a summary of the movements from the market, the currency last week. Mr. Alui, good morning and thank you for your time.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we were bombarded with a lot of circulars from the Central Bank of Nigeria last week. Would you say it made any impact on the movement, the price of the Naira and the gains and the losses?
Not significant in terms of the price movements, but I think that these moves are steps in the right direction. They're essentially aimed at improving the supply situation of FX in our economy. The truth of the matter is that at the core of the FX challenge that has bedeviled this economy for quite some time now is the fact that there is very limited FX supply to meet the ever-growing FX demand. So essentially, the circulars last week were essentially aimed at improving USD supply or liquidity, if you will. So in terms of an impact, we haven't seen a significant impact yet. I would say that these are early days. We'll continue to keep a close watch on that situation. The impact that it would have eventually really remains to be seen. But I think that it was a step in the right direction in really trying to improve FX supply and addressing the FX malaise that we dealt with for quite some time.
I think one of the outstanding ones that was highlighted is the one on the IMTOs, where truly we're supposed to now see a flexible pricing, at least from that corner. And a lot of people had said putting a cap on the rate had been a stumbling block or a hindrance, discouraging a lot of people from allowing their liquidity to flow into the official rate. So are you hopeful? Do you have high expectations, at least when it comes from that?
Yeah, that's the hope that, the removal of that cap would essentially remove all kinds of restrictions, particularly within that window. For context, diaspora remittance for last year, the World Bank estimates that about $20 billion came in terms of diaspora remittance for Nigeria. However, about 90% of those were externalized. What that simply means is that, because there are restrictions or there are caps as to what the IMTOs can quote, those that are remitting will rather have those transactions consummated abroad and then they receive the Naira here. So all of the USD, the euro, and all the foreign currency essentially gets externalized. These are consummated abroad. This money still sits in accounts abroad, while the recipients get the Naira here because of those caps, because they are unable to get the full value or full market value, if you will, for their remittances. So with the removal of these caps, it essentially means that they can get full value for it. So the hope is that all of that transaction that had been externalized will begin to find its way into the NAFEM market and ultimately improve FX liquidity in the market as well.
So towards the end of last week, we also saw another circular on the customs rate, placing it about 1,356. Well, is it really impossible for us to have just one rate cuts across board? Because, of course, now we have that, we have NAFEM, and all of that. Is it impossible, and what impacts does it have?
I think it's a reflection of the challenges that we're essentially going through with regards to the FX market, and that is why you would have, these sort of diverging rates at different segments of the market. But again, the adjustment in that custom rate is basically to reflect the reality of what had happened over the last week plus or so. If you recollect, the NAFEM rate had also been adjusted. So in reflection of that adjustment, you saw that adjustment in the custom rate as well. So typically, there's that one rate that moves and everything else has to really move. I think the idea is to achieve what we might describe as a convergence of sorts that will happen where, everything essentially gets settled in, at one rate. But that can only happen in a situation where there is a really good level of supply of USD that essentially meets all of the demand that we have. In the absence of that supply, you're certainly going to be having all kinds of rationing going on, and different segments of the market will certainly kick up as a result of pricing not being transparent. So the idea, again, is to ensure that pricing is transparent, market operators are transparent, and this should create some sort of divergence. But again, it is important that we explore all avenues to really improve FX supply, because that really sits at the core of the issue we're facing.
I guess moving some of those departments to Lagos, that's of the CBN, could help them to be more efficient in regulating and enforcing this, you think?
I mean, hopefully. I don't know what the final details are of that, but in these days of electronic technology helping things to work, I don't know that necessarily does a significant impact, but I think it should, in its own way, really help.
All right, thank you so much, Head of Investment at Ankore Global. Thank you so much, Mr. Victor Aluyi, and have a great week ahead.
Thank you.
So that's much we can take on Business Morning. Thank you so much for being a part of it. Let's head back now to the Sunrise studio. Sunrise, guys, back to you.